What's good everyone, X1G here, and today we'll be reviewing all the Scout's weapons in TF2, from worst to best, and from primaries to mills. Now the rules are very simple. Number 1, I cannot include any reskins. This means no Australian weapons, no bot killer weapons, no festive weapons, and no more specific reskins such as the mutated milk instead of mad milk, rune blade instead of the bust and basher, because they don't affect your gameplay at all. There's no gameplay difference, but they just look different. That's it. Really, that's it. So let's get into it. First, we have the stock scattergun. Now this weapon is just beautiful. It's not bad, it's not some crazy good in some certain situations, but it's perfect. Really. Now for close range, this weapon is very good. It deals a lot of damage, it fires relatively fast honestly, and it has a lot of ammo, meaning you have a lot of chances to actually beat your opponent on close range. On medium range it's pretty decent honestly, and for long range it's not as good as other weapons, let's just say that. And for that I put it in S tier. Next we have the Force Nature. Now this weapon can be stupid strong, dealing massive damage on close range and occasionally a bit higher damage on medium range compared to the stock scattergun. But it gets even better when you realize you can actually perform a triple jump with this weapon, doing an incredibly high vertical. Now all of that sounds really good, but there's one massive downside of this weapon. It has only 2 ammo in the magazine. And if you shoot once while the other one is unused, you lose it. So you become more reliant on dispensers and ammo packs, which can be really annoying, but once you get it down and adapt to it, it becomes a pretty fine weapon to use. So with that being said, the Force Nature goes into A tier. Now we have the Shortstop. 42% faster firing speed, 100% more damage per bullet, and they also reload the entire magazine at once without losing any of them compared to the Force Nature. What's the downfall? Well, you shoot 60% less pellets every shot, meaning that instead of 10 pellets for every shot you make with the scattergun, you actually shoot 4 pellets, which does sound bad, but it's actually meant for long range firing, so you become more like a sniper scout. Now for close range, Shortstop is very mid, like really mid. You may not have any screen shake while firing your shots, but your screen still does shake when you're taking damage, whether it's from a heavy spamming his bullets from the other side of the map or just taking lots of fire damage from a pyro. For medium range it's really good honestly, and it gets even better when you get to the long range. 60% less pellets sounds bad, but each pellet does twice the damage compared to the stock scattergun. Now with that being said, Shortstop is worse than the Force Nature, that's for sure, and it's not really fun to play, so I'm gonna have to put it in B tier. Now we have the Soda Popper. Now this weapon is pretty bad at first glance, but once you realize you have the 25% faster reload speed and 50% faster firing speed just like the Force Nature, then it becomes really obvious that with this weapon you can become a total beast if you use it well. But what's the downside? Well, it has the same con as the Force Nature. If one shot is unused before reloading, it is lost. So again, you become more reliant on ammo packs, but compared to the Force Nature, it's even worse. Because first of all, you deal less damage compared to the Force Nature. Second of all, there's a hype meter you need to build by dealing damage. And once you have it full, you click the right mouse button and you get the hype mode. The hype mode lasts for 8 seconds and it gives you 5 additional air jumps. And yeah, the Soda Popper is the king of mobility in this tier list. It's at the cost of unused shots and smaller clip size, resulting in much lower damage output. I'm gonna have to put it in A tier. Maybe comparable to the Force Nature, but I'm unsure which one is better. Now I have my favorite Baby Faces Blaster. Again, smaller clip size by 34% this time, and while the Scout is very well known for his mobility and movement speed, you actually become 30% slower than usual if you have it equipped. But is there anything to it? Yes, there is. After dealing about 50 to 150 damage, you become the speed demon. But how fast do you become really? Well, only about 25% faster than a normal scout. And while the other downsides are very well known and understandable, the next ones are very important. Number 1, you lose boost when taking any damage, whether it's a heavy spamming his Natasha from the other side of the board, or actually taking very nasty meat shots from other scouts. You lose a lot of it, that's for sure. And it gets even more annoying if you have bleed effect or you're in fire, which means you cannot gain any noticeable speed by dealing any damage, because the damage taken from fire and bleed negates it. Now for close range, it's actually almost as good as the stock scattergun, but you have to be more reliant on surprise attacks compared to the stock scattergun, because, you know, you're a very speedy boy. I can describe the Babyface's Blaster experience using one specific meme. On close range, it's slightly worse than the stock scattergun because you have 2 less bullets to shoot. And same goes for medium range and long range. But to compensate for that, it's actually a very fun weapon to use. And while the entire usefulness of the weapon goes in C tier, the amount of fun you can have while playing this weapon compensates enough to make it B tier. Or maybe, you know, or maybe slightly worse than the Shortstop, for obvious reasons. Now the backscat D tier. Okay, I'm gonna be serious on this one. It's almost the same as the stock scattergun, but it's even worse than the Babyface's Blaster, which is already worse than the stock scattergun. Why? 2 very simple things to say. 25% more bullet spread, meaning that your shots are more inaccurate. And number 2, no critical hits. It's the only primary in this list that doesn't have any critical hits. But I know what you might be saying. But Sonic, it's just critical hits. Crits don't exist on competitive servers, and matter of fact, there are also community servers that have disabled random critical hits. And I know that the vast majority of players play on casual servers, where there are crits enabled. With all things considered, I think, with all seriousness, the backscatter deserves a C tier, because of one very simple thing: mini crits targets when fired at your back from close range. At first, you may think it's not very noticeable, but it gets really nasty when your opponents turn around and try to run from you, allowing you to deal lots on top of lots of damage. So with all things considered, I think backscatter deserves a fine C spot. Now that we have all primaries listed, it's time to go to the secondaries. So we have the pistol, which also has a reskin of Lugermorph, I think that's how I'm supposed to read it, and Capper, which I'm not gonna lie, they look sick, they look amazing, but they are still reskins and they don't affect your gameplay at all. This weapon is very good for finishing kills off, and when you're out of ammo on your primary, you can just click to and spray and pray, like everyone says, which is basically looking left and right like you're painting God knows what, and just praying that some of these bullets will hit. On its own, the pistol is not really that good, but considering if you have a 1v1 situation with another scout and you manage to land a nasty meat shot dealing 105 damage and then you miss the rest of your shots, you can just switch to the pistol and just finish him off. And let's not forget, your screen doesn't shake at all when you're firing it. So with that being said, I think the pistol may deserve a low A tier spot, but it's definitely not as good as the next weapon we're about to discuss. Pretty Boy's pocket pistol, which compared to the stock has 25% smaller clip size, but to compensate for this, it shoots 15% faster, which also results in a much higher damage per second output compared to the stock. And as a cherry on top of it all, on every bullet you connect to your enemies, you gain 3 health. Now I know what you might be thinking, it's just 3 health. Yes, it's just 3 health, but if you manage to connect all your bullets, you get 27 health, which is already higher than what the medpills can give you. With that being said, the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol definitely goes into the A tier. Next up, we have the Winger. This one used to be my most despised weapon because it has 60% smaller clip size. Yes, 60% smaller clip size. It has only 5 bullets in the magazine, but what does it have to compensate all of that? Well, it deals 15% more damage. And also the jump height is increased by 25% when deployed. And I'm gonna be honest with you, in my opinion, the Winger is more of a utility based weapon rather than just finishing your kills off or just dealing damage in general. But if you manage to hit all your shots, the damage output is still lower than the stocks. With that being said, the Winger itself might be B tier, but the fact alone that it has such a small clip size just makes it bad. Yeah. And now we have the Flying Guillotine. And believe me when I say it, but the Flying Guillotine, it's so broken. You cannot even understand how powerful it can actually be. So for starters, it recharges after 6 seconds. But if you manage to hit your shots, this goes down to 4.5 seconds. You can deal 50 damage or 150 damage with the crit. But let's talk about the bleeding. It can last from 5 seconds to 8 seconds, depends on how long you throw it. And for every second, regardless of how you make your shot, the target gets 4 damage bleeding. And you can do it once again and keep throwing it like an idiot for as long as you want, because it recharges so damn fast. S tier. Now you have probably the most iconic scout weapon, which is the Bonk Atomic Punch. It's not damage based at all, but it's rather utility based. On use, you become invulnerable for about 8 seconds. And then if you want to use it again, you have to wait for about 22 seconds. The Bonk Atomic Punch can be really useful and save your life countless times. Whether you're taking damage and you're very low, whether you're about to get obliterated by a heavy around the corner, Bonk itself can be really good, but it stops being a good weapon when you encounter someone smart, someone who finally gets the idea of body block, meaning that you're stuck in one place for the rest of your invincibility. And let's not forget, if you take over 200 damage, you become 50% slower, and the slowness effect lasts for 5 seconds. So like, it's more of a strategy weapon rather than the skill-based weapon, but I believe it deserves a pretty fine spot on the A tier, just because how useful it can potentially be. Now the critical would be in D tier if it wasn't for the fact that if you combine it with a Shortstop, you become the Sniper Scout, dealing absolutely massive damage from wherever you want to shoot. Whether it's close range, long range, the other side of the map, whatever, you're gonna deal massive damage with it. But what's the downside? And the critical gives you guaranteed mini crits for about 8 seconds, but if you make any attack, whether it's shooting your primary, making any melee swing, you get the marked for death debuff for 5 seconds, which means every hit you take, it's gonna be a mini crit, which means you will take 35% more damage for about 5 seconds. The critical itself is kinda good honestly, but the fact that you take so much damage from literally anything makes it a mid weapon honestly. Now the Mad Mill. If you know how to use it, it's gonna go in S tier, but if you don't know, well, you will figure it out. It's an easy weapon to use. 20% decrease in recharge time when you extinguish an allied player, and it can extinguish any fire on wielder and the allied players. So you become a lifesaver at this point, but it gets even wilder when you realize that every opponent you milk with the Mad Milk, attacking them gives your allies about 60%, which means if you hit a nasty meat shot dealing 100 damage, you get 60 HP in return. So yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, the Mad Milk is broken in a good way, unlike the Flying Guillotine. Now we have the melees. The bat, well, there's nothing special about it, and Scout was honestly never meant to be put in melee, close range at all. And honestly, the only times where you might find the bat actually useful is when you have to spy check but you're out of ammo. So with that, it's just a boring weapon that deals very little damage. D tier. Now my favorite, Atomizer. For starters, it deals 15 less damage against players, but to compensate for that, every melee attack you make while in midair, you deal mini crits. Now compared to the stock, 6 more damage than the stock dealing originally 35 per hit. So it doesn't have many downsides, but the only downside it really has is 50% deploy penalty, which, let's be honest, you're not gonna notice in game. The only thing you will want to use Atomizer for is basically making triple jumps. Yeah, increase mobility. That's it. S tier. Now the Boston Basher comes as 3 rune blade. Let's be honest, Scout was never meant to be a melee combat class. Never. But it's actually a good thing, because usually people don't expect a Scout to just close the distance. So if you actually manage to close the distance, you will give them bleed effect for 5 seconds. which deals 4 damage every second. Initially 20 damage in total if the target doesn't have any medic or doesn't take any medkit. But don't miss, you hit yourself and get the bleed effect for 5 seconds. But it's actually a good thing, because this is the way competitive players build overcharge faster. So with that complex weapon, I think it may go in the A tier above the Bonk atomic punch, but just kinda not better than the Pretty Boys pocket pistol or the Force Nature. Now the Candy Cane. This honestly is more of a side effect, because the only thing Candy Cane will do is make your victims drop med pills upon death. It's kind of a you carry with yourself all the time. With the Candy Cane, you have 25% explosive damage vulnerability on wear. And just because there's so many demo mounts and so many soldiers in every server, the Candy Cane just goes in C tier. Now the Final War. 75% less damage, but you mark every single opponent for mini crits. And it gets even more nasty than that. The mini crits mark effect lasts for 15 seconds. You can just hit a heavy and run away, and he will be marked for death and more susceptible to damage for 15 seconds, making him a much easier target to kill. B tier. No, you know what? Maybe a bit higher than the Babyface's Blaster, just maybe. Now the Rap Assassin. It used to be my favorite weapon, but it's more of a utility-based weapon. It's really good with the Babyface's Blaster and the Soda Popper, because for every damage you deal, you actually get something in exchange. What am I talking about? Well, it has an Altfire, which is launching a festive ornament that shatters, causing bleeding on direct hit, and occasionally explodes, hurting everyone close to the explosion. The bleeding effect lasts for usually 8 seconds, dealing a total of 32 damage. The damage itself may not be very noticeable, but it's really well put together if you use the Babyface's Blaster. It's not meant for dealing any damage. And although it may be very fun to use, it's actually not really good in overall gameplay. So with that being said, I think it maybe go in the B tier, but I think it deserves more of a high C tier. And now for the last two. I honestly never found any good use to these weapons at all while using them for an hour straight. The only thing the Sandman does is it lowers your HP. That's it. And the only reason the Sun on a Stick actually is better than the Bat is because it can deal critical hits to burning enemies. And that's it. That's my tier list for Scout's weapons. Now, if you disagree, it's always nice to share your thoughts on it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one.